Let's get into this episode. What is inflation? It's defined as a general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. I found a couple of quotes on inflation that I thought you might enjoy. The first one comes from Alan Greenspan. In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. This next one is from Milton Friedman. He says, inflation is the one form of taxation that can be imposed without legislation. Of course, Ronald Reagan said, inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and as deadly as a hitman. John Maynard Keynes says, by a continuing process of inflation, the government can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. So why is inflation important? Consider this. In 1980, if you had saved $1 million, the interest rate on the 10-year Treasury bond in 1980 was 10.8%. So you could park $1 million, not touch the principal, and earn over $100,000 a year of income from those Treasury bonds. According to an article in the Chicago Tribune, the median family income in 1980 was $21,023. The average car price in 1980, $7,574. In 1985, the average sale price for a new house was $96,200. So you can see in 1980, having saved $1 million meant that you could park all of your money in safe Treasury bonds and enjoy a very high quality of life just living on the income. Now compare that with today. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics says that $1 million in 1980 is the equivalent of $3.3 million in the year 2020. Or I guess the right way to say this is that $1 million in 1980 has the same buying power as $3.3 million in October of 2020. So let's say you've saved $3.3 million and you decide today to go invest in 10-year Treasury bonds. Well, the current 10-year Treasury bond is paying 0.89%. So if you saved $3.3 million and bought 10-year Treasuries, the income produced would be $29,370. Even at 1%, it's only $33,000 per year. So not only has your purchasing power decreased, but the amount of income in safe assets that your dollars will produce has decreased. Also, look at what has happened to prices during this time. So that house in 1985 was $96,200. Today, the average sale price for a new home is $376,700, according to Kiplinger. Now, of course, that depends on where you live, because out here on the West Coast in the Seattle area where I live, if you can find a house for $376,000, you're doing really good. The Kelley Blue Book recently said that the average price for a light vehicle today is $37,851, compared to the price in 1980 for a vehicle, $7,574. According to ZipRecruiter, the national average salary is $66,665. Remember, that's compared to that $21,203 from 1980. So while this has been a fun exercise, a way to look back at what has happened with inflation, let's talk about where we are today with inflation. Jerome Powell recently wrote the following, and this is going to be a little bit long, but it's important that you hear it. Here it is. The persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% longer run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. After all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy. And we are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. Now, as a little side note here, also, it plays a big role on people heading into retirement because I guess you could say you've lost your income. Okay, getting back to Jerome Powell's statement here. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risks to the economy. Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to an unwelcome fall in longer-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in an adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. This dynamic is a problem because expected inflation feeds directly into the general level of interest rates. Well-anchored inflation expectations are critical for giving the Fed the latitude to support employment when necessary without destabilizing inflation. But if inflation expectations fall below our 2% objective, interest rates would decline in tandem. In turn, we would have less scope to cut interest rates to boost employment during an economic downturn, further diminishing our capacity to stabilize the economy through cutting interest rates. We have seen this adverse dynamic play out in other major economies around the world, and we have learned that once it sets in, it can be very difficult to overcome. We want to do what we can to prevent such a dynamic from happening here. He goes on to say, the significant shifts in estimates from natural rate of unemployment over the past decade reinforce this point. In addition, we have not changed our view that longer-run inflation of 2% is most consistent with our mandate to promote both maximum employment and price stability. He says, we have also made important changes with regard to price stability side of our mandate. Our longer-run goal continues to be an inflation of 2%. Now, this is going to be really important in a minute, so just remember this. Our longer-run goal continues to be an inflation rate of 2%. Our statement emphasizes that our actions to achieve both sides of the dual mandate will be most effective if longer-term inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. However, if inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns, but never moves above 2% when the economy is strong, then over time, inflation will average less than 2%. Households and businesses will come to expect this result, meaning that inflation expectations would tend to move below our inflation goal and pull realized inflation down. To prevent this outcome and the adverse dynamics that would ensue, our new statement indicates that we will seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. Therefore, following periods when inflation has been running below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. So I hope you caught what he just finished up there saying there, because it's so important that you hear that the Fed has a target rate of 2%. But what they realize is that in order to average 2%, they're going to have to let inflation run hot sometimes. And that's the period that we're entering into right now. Here's what Warren Buffett once wrote about inflation. He says, the arithmetic makes it plain that inflation is a far more devastating tax than anything that has been enacted by our legislatures. The inflation tax has been a fantastic ability to simply consume capital. If you feel you can dance in and out of securities in a way that defeats the inflation tax, I would like to be your broker, but not your partner. Oh, good old Warren Buffett.